Good morning. Welcome to the fourth update on the MIT Sloan CIO Symposium Digital Learning Series. My name is Christopher Reichert. I'm the treasurer of the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association. So the Digital Learning Series is features our monthly webinars, which go through October. And believe it or not, here we are in October. It's been quite a year. So we hold these special sessions to discuss how the series is going, to review our last session, and preview the upcoming sessions and answer your questions. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Allan Tate, the Executive Chair of the Digital Learning Series. Good morning,
Hi,
Allan.
Christopher.
Hey there. How are you doing?
Sorry, we had a little bit of a mic problem there, but I'm here. And how are
Excellent.
you today?
Excellent. Excellent. It's a beautiful sunny day here in October. The kids are back in school, if we want to call it that. The nights are a little crisper. And well, anyway, let's talk about episode 4 last week with or last couple weeks ago with digital resiliency, the post-pandemic enterprise, and digital resiliency and continuity. What sort of thoughts do you have on that?
Yeah, I thought episode 4 went very well. We had two panels. The first one was moderated by Naomi Ida, and then the second panel was moderated by a team from McKinsey, Rodney Zimmel and James Manika. Rodney actually did a 20-minute presentation as part of panel number 2. And by the way, if people on the call have not downloaded the presentation, I would encourage them to do so. I think that there's actually some additional information in it that he didn't specifically cover in the webinar. But
Yeah, it's a great read, I must say, and I have to say, just to compliment Naomi on her hosting of that session. She did a great job bringing the threads and the conversation. She did a lot of research and prepared really well for it. So hats off to her for being a great host on that one.
yes, no, I enjoyed having her, and I have her on my short list for the future.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of threads that came out. I mean, one thing that struck me that is that the COVID-19 brought about some very rapid change. One of the panelists, I think it was Barry and Naomi's panel, talked about going from 2,000 VPN connections to 20,000 in around 2 weeks, and I know that. Mark from Equinix talked about the load on the internet, and he just quoted some phenomenal numbers. I don't.
What was it? I think it was like 9 terabytes, 2 million videos being downloaded in every second.
Yes, I
Wow.
mean just phenomenal numbers. How people have had to adapt, and then also Sandy brought up this point that we have all these AI algorithms which are trained based on data, and so they've been trained to make certain predictions, and all of a sudden you get an event like COVID-19, and the algorithms are just totally thrown out of whack, which
Right.
impacts all kinds of things that we're doing. So a lot of things that you don't normally think about came out in the panel
Yeah.
for me.
Sometimes I think my household is downloading 2 million videos a second here, but that's another topic. I guess there were a couple of things that I picked up on the first panel was something that we've talked about for years and years, which is the pace of change. And it seems like pre-COVID, a lot of organizations felt that they could control that pace of change. So they knew it was coming, and they knew they had to transform in some sort of digital fashion, but they felt that they could plan for it in some fashion. And I think that this pandemic has totally upended that first of all the pace and the urgency of the change, and that came through in a lot of the conversations in that panel about the resiliency. You talked about how all of a sudden CIOs and the technical teams are worried about smaller points of entry, footprints of security, to all of a sudden it's now reversed. All of a sudden, 180 degrees, it's all thrown out there to come back in. And they stressed about how since March and April, they have spent the last 5, 6 months skipping and jumping and running as quickly as they can. It was optimistic, I think, at one point where they said that towards the end of the conversation, they talked about how they're now seeing this, I guess, as the new normal, and they're moving into a couple normal more normal activities. One was hiring. So certainly they saw less turnover. People were hunkering down during this uncertain times, but also they're finding that the pace of hiring is not as quick as before, but it has the wheels are turning again in that department, which I thought was very optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was Rodney who said that 2019 was like the peak year for cynicism about the digital transformation,
Right.
and all of a sudden 2020 came, and we've had this avalanche of digital transformation, and there was some discussion about maybe uh, the COVID situation is impacting CIOs in different industries differently. Some are running around like crazy trying to cope with it. Others have less to do because their industry was shut down. But I think it was Sandy who made the point that in his opinion, all CIOs right now are running in emergency mode, trying to cope with everything that's going on. Um, Another thing that I just wanted to bring out that was a highlight for me. In fact, I watched the video and I think I mentioned it right after one of the panels is the human factor. Just how all of the people that we had on the panel were really talking about, priority number one of, taking care of their employees, also their customers, but also just putting an oar in the water and making a difference to the community. Artie Shaw, for example, talked about how her company, Eli Lilly Pharmaceuticals, is focused on delivering medicine to people, and also helping set up testing sites for the state that she's located in. So I heard a lot of talk about empathy, EQ, or emotional intelligence, fun, resiliency, reaching out to employees. And one of the guys, I think it was Barry, made the comment that, empathy, isn't something that, he's used to
Right. Right.
getting involved with, in a work setting. And actually, I related to that because, it's not the first thing that I think of, but I think all of us are having to be empathetic, um, and have a sense of humor about where this is going. So there's definitely a lot of if anything came out is that you think about um, what is it, people, process, technology, that really the foundation is the people.
I was going to mention to you actually. I was going to say your cold, your notable cold and heartlessness has been noted. But it's true. I think. I mean, I remember reading somewhere about somebody's cat jumped up on the screen, and then within a couple of seconds, somebody's entire Zoom panel was filled with cats in people's laps as they kind of appeared in there. I've actually locked my cat out because he does like to walk across the keyboard, which might have untoward consequences here. I wanted to mention to our participants, welcome by the way, that if you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. So ask away. And one of the things that they talked about was, and this was kind of from a frustrating perspective, was the idea, the notion of ideation. Exchanging ideas and introducing new concepts and new initiatives in our organizations, or taking a hit in this COVID area. And I guess someone said, I forget who it was, said that ideation just can't happen over Zoom. And I think you and I both agree that it's not quite as black and white as that, because, for example, the CIO Symposium has been more or less a virtual organizing committee for a good part of a decade, if not more, just by necessity. And also, gathering talent for this symposium organizing, from distributed locations. So it can happen. It's not easy. And I think, to me, that speaks more to some of the cultural challenges that companies face.
Yeah. So, to be honest with you, I heard that comment a couple of times during the webinar, and personally, I would push back a little bit on that. I know that Rodney Zimmel made the comment, and someone else did too. I can't recall. But for me personally, I have been working with remote teams since the 1990s. You know, so back in the 90s, I was with Schneider Electric. I was setting up a development process that brought together a number of acquisitions. So we had a team from France, from Germany, from the United States, and so the only way that we could really get things done was remotely, and we were able to do it successfully. And then later on, when I was with IBM, there was a big push, if you were developing custom systems, to have a lot of the developers in other countries, either the Philippines we used, or India, for example. And so uh, we would have to get up early in the morning to meet with those teams. But we developed some really big and complex systems where the only way to do ideation was on remote connections, and you learn how to do virtual whiteboards. And so here's what I think that we have a lot of people coming into Zoom and they're new to it, and I remember those days. But for the people who have been forced to use remote collaboration for a long time, you do get used to it. And I think you actually can accomplish it, but it's a different mode, it's a different practice. But I would not say that you must be standing in front of a whiteboard to do ideation. I
Yeah,
think that's probably going too far.
yeah, but I would also say that I think that there's definitely incredible value in person, and I think we all feel that just from a human perspective. The other part, in the second part of the conversation we had, led by the two McKinsey people, was the consumer behavior that changed.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the question was, what is permanent and what is temporary? And for me, the underlying kind of message in there was opportunity for both technologists to manage how they interact with their customers, or for that matter, their customers are also their staff and their staff members and colleagues. Because in essence, if everyone is in some sense remote from each other, the way you interact with each other, there's a much closer bleed between who's a consumer who's buying your services and who is a colleague to they're on the same page, and you have, I think, have much less friction between those two camps.
So
The other one,
one of the specific consumer behaviors that I remember from Rodney's presentation was the idea of both grocery shopping and cooking. So with grocery shopping, um, it's been a hard sell to get people to buy their groceries online, and now with COVID, people have gotten used to that or have done it by necessity, and a lot of people aren't going to go back. It's been very successful to order your groceries, have them delivered, it's safe. Um, or the other thing that came out is that people are planning their menus more carefully so that they don't have to just run out to the store and expose themselves to the virus. They, plan for a week or even 2 weeks, get their stuff and bring it home. And then, from a personal point of view, people aren't going to restaurants, and so they're cooking more at home. I know, in my case, my daughter had a open air uh, wedding shower this past weekend, so we had to rent a tent to put up so everybody could be outside. And so she's in the front of the house opening gifts with her um girlfriends, and I'm with her brother in the back and with my new uni pizza oven, and cooking about 25 custom individual pizzas for everybody at the party. And it was fun. And who would have thought that I'd be cooking pizzas on a nice Sunday afternoon? But there it is, and I think a lot of people are doing that as well.
yeah, and I think that it's so that's the opportunity, right? I think for technology leaders to think about how if now you've got so many changes in behavior that are forced on you, it now's sort of an opportunity to sift through those and see, well, which ones do you want to keep and which ones were temporary, just from a business operational perspective. And I'd love to hear from our participants if they've experienced if they're experiencing those challenges and how are they approaching those as well. I forget who it was who said 16% of, and maybe this was a pre-pandemic number, and that was the pessimist, the peak pessimism that you talked about was that only 16% of transformations were succeeding. And I thought of that famous quote, to paraphrase it, was, 50% of my advertising is wasted. I just don't know which 50%. In this case, it's 84% of my digital initiatives are wasted. I just don't know which ones. But I think that it is, for me, the because so much of the information that's happening now, the exchange of information, is happening online. There was this term that I think Sandy Pentland used, which was called digital exhaust.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of creepy on one level, and is that in that you're kind of trawling through the after effects of a conversation or interaction to pick out nuggets of.
Hey, I just want to pick up on your word creepy there. So right after I talked about, making the pizzas, I just got a flash across my screen. Uni Ovens offering me 10% off. How does that happen? I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, but so there were these. So it's Sandy Pentland, and there's some really great. I'll just mention to people on sloanreview.mit.edu. There's some great articles. If you Google Sandy Pentland, one of the things he talked about was this idea of data exchanges, as the next generation of information exchange. So instead of companies hoarding information, almost like a Facebook and a Google and whatnot, Alphabet, that it's actually distributed amongst different data stores, I guess, if you will. And I will admit that this is a new concept to me. And instead of actually one or a few organizations having a huge store of information that is insecure by that old bank robber analogy of, why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is, right? Same thing. Why do hackers attack these places? That's where the data is. This is distributed, and the portion of information that's in each area is in essence not as useful as when it is exchanged between organizations. So I must admit, I'm trying to get my head around how this works, but I think that it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, well, okay. So I remember him talking about that too. And I have to admit that I sort of made a note that I have to go and read a little bit more about that. But he said, when it comes to data, one of the worst things you can do is to create what he called a data lake, right? That to bring all the data together into one place is just inviting people to go and steal the money, as you're suggesting.
Right.
But to have it federated and then instead of sharing the data, to share what he called the impact. So I guess I took it as you analyze the data and you can answer questions about the data, but you don't actually share the data itself. I had never heard this concept before, but it was very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think the term he used was, people can ask questions of the data.
Of the data, yes.
Right, versus, right. And so you get back the answer that you're looking for, but not necessarily have the huge store of information. So I think that, since Sandy Pentland is, considered the sort of person who predicts the future, I think it's worth paying attention to what he said there and the research that's coming out. And again, I would just, if you look at sloanreview.mit.edu, maybe we can put some of these links up in the agenda on mitcio.com underneath that panel, because I think there's some interesting reading for our participants to pursue.
Yeah, and actually, there was a article recently in, I believe it was Sloan Management Review, about cybersecurity. I actually forwarded it to Carrie Perlson, and she's going to put it up on her website as well. And I'll just give you the headline. They were saying that, the cost of cybercrime is going to rise to $6 trillion a year, just a phenomenal number. And, so there's a lot of complexities that have come out with COVID. And actually, a couple of the people that we had in our earlier episode where Carrie was the moderator were actually quoted in the article.
Yeah, it's somebody said, I think it was in the first panel, that security, someone, if they have security experience, that's the hottest item. I think it might have been Barry from Experience, and that's the biggest hiring challenge that they're facing overall. So I'm conscious of time. You did a survey. You have some thoughts you wanted to express on those, right?
Yeah, let me share my screen and just go to PowerPoint. I just want to briefly go over. So what we've been doing is I have been sending out some surveys to the audience,
Hey,
as
you want to go
part.
into slideshow mode there, so it's bigger?
I'm sharing my screen. I think people can see it.
Yeah, if you go to slideshow on the top there and just say start slideshow.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yes, sir.
Right.
There
Okay,
we go.
there you go.
Great.
Okay. So what we've been doing is we have been doing surveys for the audience. And so basically, I would say we did two that were focused on people's preferences for virtual content. Um, and I apologize, of course, there's a lawnmower, but that's, part
Welcome
of
to COVID.
it, just the way life is these days. I'm just going to close the window.
At least I'm not coming by with one of those leaf blowers that just goes up and down and up and down.
So the first two surveys were focused on virtual content. Survey number 3 was focused on preferences for an in-person event. So if we're only talking about virtual content, do people prefer, a monthly style like the digital learning series or an all-day style like the Symposium? And by a 3-to-1 margin, people prefer a monthly style of delivery. So that's pretty telling in terms of our planning for 2021.
Sort of bite-sized pieces.
And then another thing is that we looked at what do people like in terms of the duration. Now in 2020, we started out fairly simple, and then we intentionally increased the complexity of our episodes just to sort of test our systems and experiment and find out what works. But the audience response is that they prefer 60 to 90 minutes, and you can see after an hour and a half, the desire to have longer webinars just drops off precipitously. So
Right.
for 2021, we are looking at keeping the webinars within the 90-minute time frame. So the message that I got from the audience is less is more.
Crisp
Well,
and to the point. Makes sense.
we also asked the audience, what do they value in terms of features that go along with the webinar? And so, the number one was the recordings. Almost 100% of people put very high value of recordings, and also research and presentations like Rodney's panel. The next thing is just having context. So they want to be able to attend the webinars and have access to information about the speakers and the bios and the topic descriptions, that type of thing at their fingertips. Then we talked about upvoting. So if you recall, we had an app that we used in the in-person symposium called Slido, which would allow the participants to upvote. There is an upvoting feature within Zoom. It doesn't work exactly like Slido, and in Slido, the integration with Zoom isn't completely developed. So, I am aware that people desire upvoting, but I'm not positive if we're going to be able to do that in 2021. And by the way, on this chart where I have a green check mark, these are things that I believe we will be able to provide to the audience in our 2021 program. So we're going to try to take the 2020 program, take the feedback that we've gotten from the audience, and provide richer features to the degree that we're providing virtual content, I should
Hey,
say.
wait. You have a question mark next to group yoga. What's up with that?
Yeah, well, so group yoga. Now, I went to a symposium from another organization over the summer. It was a virtual symposium, and they had group yoga in the afternoon. I actually attended. I didn't hurt myself, but so I wanted to ask our audience, what they thought about it, and you could see, well, we do have 20% of the people who would be into that. Um, sort of the core of the middle here, from social network, town hall, group networking, one-on-one, those are all, kind of focused on adding a networking component. I think that there's a lot of desire to get back to connecting with each other as part of the webinar series. The one thing that I would point out is that the town hall meeting got a much higher score than I was expecting. This is another feature that I experienced by going to other people's webinars. So this is part of what I do, right? Go to other
Mhm.
symposium, other webinars, and see what they do, see what works. A lot of people really had, a positive feedback about getting everybody in the room
Yeah.
and getting a chance to talk. Um, so yeah, a lot of networking. And then, when it comes to networking, what when we asked people, well, what do you want to talk about? Our audience, frankly, is a fairly serious audience. They want to have topic conversations. So, sort of like the lunchtime networking that we would do at the in person event. Also, there was a lot of desire to have follow up conversations on the episodes. Those two particular points got over 70% as important or very important, uh, less so for sharing with each other, and much less so for the idea of having a online uh, social. Although I must admit, I'm sure everyone in COVID times has had, some kind of an online social or cocktail party or something like that.
Yeah, I do think about back in March, April, one of my friends hosted an online concert, and I think there were like 30 performers over the course of 3 hours, and you could dip in or dip out, which was really special. I was going to actually reach out and see if she wanted to do that again because it's amazing the talent that's out there, which would be nice to tap into. So I'm conscious of time here, um, and I don't know if you finished your
Well,
presentation.
just one more quick slide, and then we'll be done. Survey number 3, I unfortunately did not get enough responses to report on here. However, I did add that survey to this webinar, so I would ask the audience to fill it out if they haven't done so already. And that's it for the survey results, Christopher.
Excellent. So let's talk about what's coming up, episode number 5, which is our last of this experimental season. It's hard to believe. Here we are. Looks like it's going to be a really fun one. Uh, we've got speakers from Slack talking about their technology. We've got one of our award winners and the chief information officer from CarMax. We've got Equinix. We've got a CIO from Adobe as well, and Zimmer Biomet. And our presenters are going to be George Westerman and Mike Grandinetti. And of course, you are going to be doing a fireside chat with Guy Snodgrass, who, if people aren't familiar with him, is a former fighter pilot, Top Gun, of that sort of Top Gun class of pilots, who's going to talk about leadership. And he's got some pretty incredible stories and interesting stories to tell. So that's October 14th at 10:30. If you haven't signed up, please sign up now. So,
Yep, absolutely. Episode 5 is going to be very exciting, all about digital transformation and closing out the year.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. These are produced by the MIT Sloan CIO Digital Learning Series production team. You can watch these on YouTube. You can go to our CIO Symposium channel there. You can also find them on our agenda page at mitcio.com/agenda. You can also subscribe to the audio only format where you find your podcast. So be sure to sign up for our next session coming up soon. And I would, of course, love to thank our sponsors without whom this would not be possible, including Adobe, Catchpoint, Equinix, Slack, Rimini Street, and VM. So thanks very much, Allan. Thanks very much for everyone else for joining us, and see you on the 14th.
Thanks, Christopher.